Hello friends, and welcome back to my sewing corner. I hope you're all doing well and having a great summer so far. I am so excited about today's video because I'm going to be turning curtains that I found at the thrift store into a couture-worthy corset. Alright, so I got these curtains at my local thrift store for $2.99. $2.99. I'm obsessed. It's a really beautiful fabric, and maybe I wouldn't use them as curtains, but I certainly want to wear it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I love the shape of the bottom. I'm definitely going to keep that as intact as possible. I would love to have this trim along the bottom of the corset, and I'm just hoping I can turn it into something really beautiful, and it's only going to require a little bit of deconstruction. I know if my local thrift store had these curtains, that yours certainly would have something similar. So if you do a project like this, I would love to see what you make. I think this is super simple. You don't have to make a corset, but I think this is going to be really great. And like I said, if you do anything similar, I would love to see it. So feel free to tag me on Instagram, and while you're there, follow my page, and you can also follow my other social medias. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. While the curtain has a really good base shape, I definitely still need a pattern. So the first thing on today's agenda is going to be to make a quick little pattern by draping it on this lovely lady right here. And I will show you exactly how I do it. So we're gonna get right into it, and I'll show you how I make the pattern. So first I started off here with just a little sketch of what the vibes are. We're going for something really cute, really simple, and just something really easy to upcycle. Basically, I just wanted to start with a sketch because I needed some inspiration to visualize what I'm making a pattern for. So here it is. And now we're gonna get right into pattern making. So this is my dress form. It's from the Shop Company online. I ordered it in a size 4 with a padding kit. So I padded it out to make it to my exact measurements, so I know that when I drape something, it's definitely gonna fit me. If you don't have a dress form and you wanna do an upcycling project like this, you have a couple options. You can either order a pattern on Etsy for whatever top you wanna make, or you can take a top that you already own and look at how it was constructed and copy the pattern from that top that you already have. Both of those are great options. I know dress forms can be a massive investment, especially for people who are just starting out. So those are my 2 recommendations if you don't have a dress form. But today I am going to start on my dress form by taping out my style lines, which is going to give me a guide for where I'm going to make my pattern pieces on the dress form. For this corset, I want the top to be straight and I want it to lay just above the top of the bust. So that's why I have my line here, and then it goes all the way around to the back panels. So because I don't want this top to be form-fitted, I'm not making cups for it, it's just going to be flat across the front. I'm going to make something called a bust bridge, which is going to flatten out this area. It means that I won't have to worry about coming into any problems with this form-fitted area. I'm just going to drape my piece over and it'll be fine. Now that I have everything on my dress form ready to go, I have my shape taped out. We are just going to get to pattern making.
Here's a little bit of the pattern making process. Now, if only it really was this fast in real life. Once we pull those flat pieces of fabric with our markings from the dress form, we are not done pattern making. The next step is going to be to do something called truing our patterns, and that's really important, and what it basically means is to make it complete. Right now, all we have are some dots and our corners to mark those really important lines, but now we're going to add in those completed lines, which are our seam lines, and then we also have to add in our seam allowance and make sure all of our seams match up, because we do not, I'll repeat that, we do not want our seams to not match up when we go to cut our fabric. So it's really, really important that you take a little bit more time and pay attention in the pattern making stage, because that is really going to help your garment shine and it's going to make it fit perfectly, I promise you. Now that my pattern is all done for now, I am taking a little bit of a break to do some deconstruction on this curtain. Basically, I just took off anything I didn't want, opened up all of the seams, and removed the trim so that I can work with just the fabric itself and then add the trim back later. After all that, I went ahead and I started on my prototype, and if you do not make prototypes, I strongly encourage it. There's no better time to start than now, and basically what you're going to do is just use your same pattern, make it in a fabric that's really cheap, like a cotton or muslin or something similar to the actual fabric that you're going to be making it in, but not expensive, because it's just a sample to see if it fits. You can make any adjustments or corrections on your pattern, and you won't have to worry about if it will or will not fit you, because you've already done all the work beforehand. Here is my first prototype, and the only correction I wanted to make was to take in the bust a little bit, so I made those corrections on my flat pattern. I took it over to my sewing machine, and I did only half of it just to make sure what I was taking in was enough, and I checked to make sure it was all good. Okay, I know what you've been thinking. Hannah, when are you going to actually cut this pattern out of the real fabric? And here we are. I tried to preserve as much of this fabric as possible, really being careful about my placement, and I also really wanted to use the scalloped edge, so here I am using that and cutting out my center front panel. Now that all my pattern pieces are cut out, as you can see here, I'm ready to take these over to my sewing machine and get them assembled. Let's take a moment and give a round of applause for this lovely lady so far. We have her sewn together, and our next step is going to be to give her some structure, some support, and we're going to add in some boning. But wait, if you're saying, Hannah, aren't you forgetting something? Yes, I am. What I'm forgetting is to check if this fits me. It looks like my pattern adjustments were perfect, so like I said before, make a prototype. It will save you when it comes time to make it out of the real fabric. For now, we are just gonna get right into the next step. Because this project is upcycled, I wanted to stay true to that, and I didn't want to use any excess materials if I didn't have to. So that being said, I'm choosing to not line this corset. Instead, what I'm doing is trimming down my seam allowances to about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm using a 5/8 inch black ribbon that I already had on hand to create casings over the seams for my boning to fit into, and that allows everything to be really clean and finished and still gives me that structure without requiring a lining. This fabric is also just really beautiful, and I didn't want to hide any of its magnificence on the inside or the outside, so that's another reason why I'm choosing not to line this garment. As I'm pinning these channels in place, I'm being really careful to make sure it's centered over the seam so that when I actually stitch it down, it is going to be centered and my stitch lines are not going to cross that seam. So I'm just going to take that over to my sewing machine and stitch as close to the edge as possible on each side of the ribbon that I pinned over my seams. Now that all my channels have been stitched down, I'm just gonna measure my boning, and one tip is that you wanna make sure that your boning is shorter than your total seam. Essentially, you wanna make sure that there's enough room on the top and the bottom so that you're not gonna end up stitching over your boning because it's plastic, and this type of boning you cannot stitch over. There is a type of boning that you can stitch over, so this is just what I had on hand, as I said before, just trying to use the materials that I already have. But it's definitely really important to leave that extra room at the top and bottom because I do not want any broken needles today. So I'm just going to go ahead and put some boning in all of my seams. And another tip is that you want to make the edges of your boning round. Some people do this using a really fancy filing tool, but you can just clip the corners that are sharp with your scissors just to make sure that nothing pokes through your casing and that your garment is just really strong. After giving my corset that boning structure, I took it over to my overlock machine and I serged the edges because I didn't want any of this fraying to be visible. I wanted to give it a clean finish before I move on to the next step. And if you don't have an overlock machine, you can always use a store-bought bias binding, or you can make your own bias binding. It's really simple to do, and that's really one of the things that I love about sewing is there's almost always another way to do something. Speaking of another way to do something, instead of doing a normal hem on these back panels, I'm going to measure, fold over, and press these edges down and actually use something called a fusible hem adhesive, which is going to permanently adhere these two sides together instead of hemming and stitching the sides together, because I don't want those stitch lines to show and I wanted some extra reinforcement for when I add my grommets. This is a really quick and easy way to hem something, except it is permanent, so you can't make any changes later, but I really think it gives a clean and nicely finished look to the back of my corset. Remember the trim we removed from the curtain when it wasn't a corset? Well, now we're going to attach it back as a trim on the top and bottom, and I'm going to top stitch it in place using just a straight stitch. This pink trim adds so much life to this corset, and it was one of my favorite parts of the curtain when I first saw it hanging on the rack in the store. I had to have it. It goes so well with the print, and it was honestly just pure luck that I ended up having enough of this trim on this one curtain panel to end up using it for the entire top and entire bottom of the corset. It really is just so beautiful and adds so much character to this piece, and I'm really happy that it worked out the way it did. Guys, here is the final corset. I am obsessed with how it turned out, and I still can't believe this project only cost a little over $3. It honestly makes me want to go buy all the curtains at the thrift store and turn them into corsets. The ribbon, the grommets, the boning, and the fusible hem tape were all things I had on hand, which made this project so simple. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I really hope you liked this project, and if you did, make sure you subscribe for more. Bye!